Well, thank you very much for being promptly here. We're ahead of time by 5 minutes. And very grateful for that, and very grateful for you being here. Thank you very much. This is a very desperate attempt to basically overcome the HRC's deficiencies, who have thrown us out of that building to this building. And I had an email from a very important personality saying it's very sad to see that side events have been called off, and therefore I'm going to speak. And that was Alfred.
You know, little footnote on that. There is method. This is not an accident. When there was a financial crisis back in around 1990,
1990, yes.
they actually decided to cut the only meeting that had content, the subcommission on the protection and promotion of human rights.
Yes.
Because the subcommission hurt the states. The subcommission actually was substantive.
Absolutely correct.
Much more effective than the advisory committee today.
Yes.
And of course, what is the added value of the session of the council? The side events. That's where it's at. That's where people are saying what has to be said. So why are you going to cancel? Not the meeting of the council that may have actually hundreds of people in the room. No, the side events that only have 100 or maximum 200.
Max too.
There is method. They
Yes.
don't want the substance. They
No,
want
but-
just to keep the motion.
But the things have gone worse. Now NGOs are not allowed to come into the assembly hall. Just do the presentation, intervention,
Yeah.
and get out. They're not allowed even to sit there. Which actually means, to be quite honest, NGOs have virus, what diplomats don't have. This is what it is. But anyway, welcome to this side event. It's a side event of a side.
It's a panel event.
To democratic despotism and crimes, violation of self-determination, and on the plate is Alaska, Hawaii, and Kashmir. And the best person to start with this is perhaps our first special representative on international and democratic equitable order. So, Mr. Professor
I
Alfred
have a
Rosales.
certain number of reports back in 2014, when I was still the independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order. I put out a report on the theory and practice of self-determination. Basically, it's all in there. But then, before leaving the mandate in 2018, I did another report in which I summarized what the mandate had done in 6 years, what ought to be done in the future.
Yeah.
And one of the big chapters remained self-determination, because I have been pushing for many years, even before I was the mandate holder, I was pushing for the going back to what the Commission of Human Rights had, self-determination as a permanent item on the agenda. Why that? Because the realization of self-determination is a conflict prevention strategy. Since the Second World War, countless wars had their origin not in the aspiration for self-determination, but in the unjust and illegal denial of self-determination. That actually nurtured any number of wars. So if you want to have peace and justice and sustainable peace and justice, then you'd better have a mechanism, and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights could have that, the Secretary General could have one. I suggested the creation of a special advisor
Yeah.
to the Secretary General on self-determination, so as to act early warning, obviously, but then most important, mediation. There are legitimate grievances of so many groups. I mean, the oldest, the Kashmiris, I mean, since the partition of the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah.
And notwithstanding any number of resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly, you still don't have self-determination, as the Sahrawis don't have it,
Yes.
notwithstanding the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, as the Tamils tried to get and didn't get, as the Igbos and the Ogonis of Biafra tried and didn't get. So there's a lot of, shall we say, frustration in many groups, in many peoples, nations in Africa. You may or may not know the tensions that there are between South Cameroon and North Cameroon. We had in the Human Rights Committee, when I used to be the secretary of the committee, we had any number of cases under the optional protocol concerning Cameroon. The experts in the Human Rights Committee kind of chickened out. They didn't want to look at the cases from the aspect of Article 1 of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So they dealt with it under the concept of minorities. So peoples are being degraded into just minorities, and they have limited protection under Article 27. But of course, Article 27 does not promise autonomy or federalism, and much less self-determination. So the cases we had concerning Cameroon, I remember, also included torture and disappearances, because the government of Cameroon did in fact eliminate their troublemakers, those who wanted to renegotiate the relationship so that the English-speaking Cameroonians did not have to be under the French-speaking Cameroonians. They are, after all, not the same people, not the same ethnic group, and that is not going to go away. I mean, Africa is a powder keg for the next decades, as the African people become better educated and they realize that they have been left out, and why other people have self-determination and they don't. They're going to start pushing for it, and that's why the United Nations should be prepared to address it. What is particularly sad is that the UN always comes too late. Everybody knows.
In many cases, it doesn't come at all.
Also, the referendum in Sudan only took place after tens of thousands of people have been killed in 30 years of armed conflict. Same thing with Ethiopia and Eritrea. They were finally separated by virtue of a United Nations referendum. Why doesn't the United Nations insist and put pressure on India in order to finally have a referendum in Kashmir? Why don't they mediate so that there can be a referendum, say, in Biafra, or a referendum in Sri Lanka? But of course, they don't. They'll wait until there's been a major civil war, and then, and only then, do they step in.
Yes.
Ditto East Timor.
Yes.
There again, that could have been solved at the time that Portugal moved out, and the invasion, the illegal invasion and annexation by Indonesia could have been avoided. But back to the reports. I'll see whether I have them there, but I would like to see the reports used. I always said that we, special rapporteurs and independent experts of the United Nations, we are an assembly of Cassandras, because we keep identifying problems, we keep warning, we keep formulating recommendations, and they are filed away and forgotten because there's no follow-up. There's no mechanism. I have no clue whether recommendations that I have made in my reports have been implemented. Thanks to non-governmental organizations and civil society, thanks to Leon and thanks to Ronald, for instance, the famous or infamous paragraph 69 little n of my report of 2013, that one comes up again and again, that these peoples have a right, because they're non-self-governing, they have a right to have the Committee of 24 of the General Assembly take up their petitions.
Yeah.
And it's not happening yet. I mean, I personally spoke with the chair of the, with 3 chairs of the group of 24, and unfortunately, it didn't move. And if we get someone like Vanuatu to push for any of the Pacific Islands that would like to push for Hawaii, Alaska, and Rapa Nui, West Papua, to be picked up by the General Assembly Group of 24, that would be useful. But again, you have to speak, you have to speak, you have to speak, so I shut up for the moment. I'm available.
What about Catalonia?
Well, I didn't see any Catalan faces here, and I have written, of course,
No,
a
I
great deal.
just want to bring to a notice, there is, you have met the chap, just 1 minute please. You have met the chap called Carlos
Puigdemont.
Puigdemont, who is an MEP now,
Yes.
and he is in the Kashmir group, we have a Kashmir group in the European Parliament. And he speaks so high of you because you have met him. But,
Several times.
yeah,
I advised them before the referendum, as I advised also the government of Rajoy.
yeah,
Actually, I gave them both good advice, and of course, no one paid any attention to it. I told Puigdemont, you don't force this, you don't hold the referendum on the 1st of October,
yeah.
because there's going to be violence. Just keep the tension there. It's going to fall on your lap like a ripe apple.
Yeah.
Just hold on, but don't hold the referendum, because the others are ready to use anything, any force in order to prevent it. And then I told the government, in a way, I am playing both sides. I told the government, look, they have a right to a referendum.
Yeah.
That is clear.
Mhm.
On the other hand, this is a very important decision. So you're not going to have the referendum go by 51% like Brexit. You're not going to have it done just simply by a simple majority. You can say there must be a public participation of 60% of the population, and then of that 60%,
2/3 should.
exactly.
Yes, I know.
So for something that important, you don't want to let it go just by a little bit, so that half the population feels left out, disenfranchised. So there has to be really a genuine majority. And of course, the advisors of Rajoy, took a very ideological position. There's no right to self-determination. They said self-determination is a closed issue that was only for decolonization, period. That's it. That is the position of Rajoy and of his advisors. And I regret it, because
It's a sad story.
it is a sad story. They used a lot of violence. I've interviewed people who've been seriously injured, who lost eyes because of the use of bullets, etc. Nothing in comparison with Kashmir.
Carlos was detained, he was in prison.
Well, actually, and that is a failure of international law. It's a failure of the refugee system. Because if anybody has a claim to refugee status under the Refugee Convention, is Carles Puigdemont. I mean, everything, absolutely everything that the man has done is political, and that falls under the protection of the 1951 Refugee Convention. Same thing goes for Julian Assange. Same thing goes for Snowden.
Yes.
Had I been the judge in Schleswig-Holstein,
Yes.
I mean, I would have, and it is provided for in the law, you can dismiss a claim or a request for extradition, for instance, that is on its face, prima facie, frivolous and vexatious. What
Okay,
Spain was doing was frivolous and vexatious. I would have said, look, the principle of non-refoulement is absolute. It's jus cogens. You cannot detract from it. You cannot erode it. This is a clear case where this man has protection. Point final. So we are not going to detain him. I thought it was very wrong on the part of the of Germany to hold them on some trumped up charges that were trumped up on their face. Okay,
okay, now, before we move on, I wanna ask about the Kosovo opinion, and how is that gonna help cases like Alaska, Hawaii, Kashmir? And then you mentioned the right to protection and remedy. And of course, with the Charter of the United Nations, it's illegal to block us with threats, duress, and coercion as we enter the 20th century UN Charter and the right to protection. Could you speak about that a bit?
well, Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter is as clear as water.
Yeah.
Not only the use of force, but also the threat of the use of force is illegal. But when it comes to this self-determination of peoples and the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice in the Kosovo case. Now, international law is not static. It is always developing. It's dynamic. So, considering that Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, and all the other 14 republics of the former Soviet Union attained self-determination and were able to separate.
Absolutely.
By the way, contrary to the provisions of the Constitution of the Soviet Union. It did not follow the procedure. So it was, as far as internal constitutional law, it was unconstitutional. The separation of Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, etc., from the former Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was also against the provisions of the Constitution. But this is a factum. It happened. And all the European countries immediately, especially Germany, within a week of the unilateral declaration of independence by Croatia, Germany had recognized it. So that actually could have been seen as an international wrongful act at that moment, because international law had not evolved at that moment. It was in the process of evolution. So, finally it comes to the International Court of Justice. And there, paragraph 80 says it all. You have the tension between the principle, and it's only a principle, the principle of territorial integrity and the right of self-determination. Which one is going to have the priority? The court decided self-determination. Paragraph 80, what does it say? The principle of territorial integrity has only, exclusively, external application. That is, State A cannot invade State B, encroach on State B, annex anything in State B. Example, Israel cannot annex the Golan Heights. Israel cannot annex the occupied territories. That is illegal. That is a violation of the territorial integrity of these people. On the other hand, in the case here that we have in the case of Kosovo, whereas the territorial integrity of Yugoslavia was more or less guaranteed in Security Council Resolution 1244, the International Court of Justice decided that because of the tension of these two principles of territorial integrity and right of self-determination, that you could not use the principle of self-determination internally to deny the people of Kosovo their inalienable right to self-determination. Of course, we could have seen another scenario. The United Nations could have mediated to arrange for a very generous autonomous status, including fiscal autonomy, for Kosovo within a Serbian or Yugoslav federation. That would have been conceivable. But the International Court of Justice went down on record, paragraph 80, saying that you cannot use territorial integrity internally. Of course, that doesn't matter to Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel says that is sui generis. That is a single case not to be repeated ever. You know, it does not create a precedent. Of course it created a precedent.
Yes.
Except that self-determination, as everybody knows, is not self-executing. You have the right, no question, you have the right. But if the major powers do not allow you to exercise the right, you cannot exercise it. So the Kashmiris have a right, they should have their referendum, but the Secretary General of the United Nations, the General Assembly of the United Nations, is not forcing India to hold the referendum.
Yes.
That's where the problem is, and the problem has enforcement. You have the norms, you have the mechanisms, but you have no implementation. That's what the problem was.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Alfred. If you recall, Alfred, we did explore and we believe that that is what the situation is. And you were very kind and generous to go through the documentation of genocide in Kashmir. And we, as a Kashmiris here, many of them are here, believe that there is actually genocide going on in Kashmir.
If Srebrenica, one single massacre,
Yes.
and qualifies as a genocide, and you have here
Serious.
70 years,
Serious.
70 years of consistent oppression and, well, an attempt to destroy in whole or in part
Yes.
the Muslim population of Kashmir.
We said Kashmiri Muslims, as we put it
Yeah.
in the document. And William was very helpful.
Mhm.
He actually wrote an opinion on this.
Mhm.
And
He's talking about Professor William Shabas at the University
Middlesex.
of Middlesex in London.
Therefore, I think we are moving in the direction, if not ICC, it definitely is an ICJ matter. We are trying.
Both.
The problem is India and Pakistan both are not the signatories to the Statute of Law.
Mhm.
And
On the other hand, an investigation can be started.
investigation, yes.
I mean, an investigation has been started
No, but
with regard to Afghanistan.
But what we
You know, 6 days ago, huh?
Yeah.
Because first they had been knocked out by a little chamber of three
Yes.
judges.
Yes.
And Fatou Bensouda, bravo Fatou, she insisted, and now in the appeals chamber,
Security Council has the inherent powers.
Yes, but,
to order
but
for
do you
the
have that much
investigation by
clout
the-
within the Security Council? But what is important is, and this is what we are working on, is that the chief prosecutor need to refer the matter to the Security Council. If you have an abundance of evidence.
I
That
think
would make it,
Fatou has the guts to do it.
But Fatou has given some indication.
I mean, Ocampo would not have done it.
Obviously, you've got to have the credible list of perpetrators, that is intent and perpetrators.
But the prosecutor, how he can proceed with the investigation without having the authority?
This is what we are saying.
Yes.
He has the authority to refer on his own to the Security Council. And if the Security Council doesn't come back to him within a matter of 6 months, then he can start his own investigation.
There's another avenue with regard to the International Court of Justice, as opposed to the
ICJ, yes,
ICC.
there is.
No, well, of course, you can always send a request to the ICJ for an advisory opinion under Article
Yes,
95.
yeah.
But what some people forget. Article 9 of the Genocide Convention provides for automatic referral to
That-
the International Court of Justice.
Yes,
Just on the issue of genocide. You will not be able to do it on the issue of crimes against humanity.
no, crimes against humanity would be in ICC.
But, right, but if it's a question
It's
of
not just a
genocide,
question-
any interpretation of the Genocide Convention is within the jurisdiction of the ICJ automatically.
Yes.
So, the United States is a state party to the,
No, they're all,
ICJ,
India, Pakistan
India is a state party to the,
party to the signatory to convention, that problem is
that is
solved there.
definitely,
But
definitely
it
an
is not
item.
solved in the ICC. If it was, they were, both the countries were, then it would have made the life much more easier.
Yeah.
But still, Shabazz was very helpful and,
He is
thank you very
always
much.
helpful. I'm amazed, the guy is brilliant,
He is brilliant.
absolutely brilliant.
Thank you very much, sir. Now we move on to Alaska. And that's my very dear friend, if anybody doesn't know him. Is anybody who doesn't know him?
He is our ambassador.
Well, Ambassador Ronald Barnes.
Collective ambassador.
Okay.
Please, Ambassador.
Yeah, and the title of this, Democratic Despotism and Crimes, Violations of Self-Determination. When we were thinking about this, the reason why I wanted democratic despotism was because African states were accusing the European states in the deliberations of 1469 to remove Alaska and Hawaii from the list of non-self-governing territories. They said, not only is this democratic despotism, you are not going to use this with many African states who have yet to decolonize. This is a gift to United States of America only because you were instrumental in winning World War II.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at the process of Alaska and what we did not, or Hawaii, the same thing, because in both cases, the United States military and American citizens voted, whereas when they did this in France and Tunisia, Morocco, and then the administration of the Netherlands to Indonesia, it was very clear. They said, no, you in these territories, Dutch to Indonesia, French to these French territories, have no right to vote on the status.
And that is correct. That is a correct interpretation of the principle of eligibility for a referendum. By the way, the Human Rights Committee in the decision Guillot against France concerning New Caledonia also, because there was a referendum held back in, could have been 20 years ago. And there was a newly arrived French person who wanted to participate in the referendum, and she was denied the right, so she came to the Human Rights Committee, and the Human Rights Committee said no. An Article 1 self-determination referendum is not for you. It's only for those natives and also for those who identify, who have really a genuine link to the territory, who have been there, say, already for 2 generations or something, and who identify themselves with them as opposed to identify with the mother country. So you also have jurisdiction, rather jurisprudence of the Human Rights Committee that applies in the case, and certainly it's ridiculous to have settlers voting. It says if you were to ask the Israeli settlers in the occupied territories, do you want to be part of Palestine or do you want to be part of Israel? Come on, it's a farce.
So the reason why I like the discussion on territorial integrity, because recently the Chagos case made it
Fantastic.
very clear.
Bravo.
Yes.
They said, this is very clear, you are not done recolonizing. This has to be dealt with. United Kingdom and those of interest, of course, United States of
Now, the
America.
problem is the United Kingdom is doing this to the International Court of Justice.
Yeah, this
That is
is,
the problem. It's like the United States got condemned by the ICJ in the Nicaragua case. It got condemned in La Grande case. It got condemned in the Avena case. Implementation?
Yes,
Zero.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Zero.
And this is important to us because when the accusations came down against the United States of America and its allies, they did not stand up for us. But what they did do is they went down the list and they said, what about General Assembly Resolution 742? What about General Assembly Resolution 644, 1038, which has to do with racial discrimination in non-self-governing territories, which is important especially for us because the United States, as you put in the memorandum that you wrote, maybe you could speak to that famous memorandum that you did, where the two cases,
Infamous.
infamous, but
Infamous, much more
At the
infamous.
I like this,
last day of my mandate.
the last day of
Because
of
otherwise, Beatriz Balbín Chamorro would have blocked it. Had it been,
Yeah, that's the.
the one paragraph.
that's the one paragraph that refers to the jurisprudence. Well, I might just simply because it's too technical, but I just remind the reader that the United States Supreme Court has a history of racism, and here you have a judgment, 1955. Which talking about the purpose of acquisition of territory is the settlement of the white race. And then they use their own precedent, go back to the T. Hitton judgment, and the Johnson, the McIntosh judgment of 1823, which held, and now watch this one,
Listen to this carefully.
that the character and religion of the native inhabitants of America justified, quote, considering them as a people over whom the superior genius of Europe might claim an ascendancy. It's almost poetic. Unquote. So clear saying, the land is for the whites, and you indigenous,
Get out.
get out of here.
Yes.
That is basically what the Supreme Court decided, not only in this case, but in other cases as well. So this was concerning, dated 30th of April 2018, my very last day.
The last day of this
And then this was sent to everybody. It was sent
So
to the
not only the
Secretary
statement
General, the
is
General Assembly, the Security Council, member states and observer states, etc. It was fun.
So you
Yeah.
became infamous.
Infamous.
Yeah.
Infamous. And then you should have no regrets.
Yeah,
And that one last day made him more enemies than his
Yes.
entire period.
yeah. No,
Last day.
the good part of this is what he hit the nail on the head of is that he said this is a crime against humanity.
Yes.
In 1999, members of the Subcommission on Human Rights then were going to do a resolution on Alaska. And one of the African members came and said, this is more salient, as they like to say, more important, because they use this in the footnote, meaning it's a ground upon which they make their decision. So they stand on not only the land is for the settlement of the white race in Alaska, but then we have to adhere to the superior genius
Yes.
of the European civilization.
I mean, I love European civilization, huh? But I mean, live and let live. Just live and let live. Loving yourself. I have no problem. I do love myself. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to loot your land. That I'm going to take your land away.
good
You're
point.
entitled to your land.
Yeah. See, there's two things that are happening for us, or there are more things, but we're fighting against the Donlin mine. We're fighting against the Pebble mine in Alaska, where on his way back from the Orient, President Trump landed and met with the Governor Dunleavy.
Yeah.
And they declared in a meeting that Alaska is a resource warehouse of the United States of
And
America.
it is.
Yeah.
Except that the indigenous of Alaska are poor as church mice, and the trillions of dollars worth of oil and gold and other natural resources are for the whites.
Yeah, there's one aspect of this, because when you look at Article 73, going back to who gets to vote, the word free political institutions as opposed to puppet governments. In Alaska, we have puppet governments. You could name the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, the corporations, and also the regional nonprofit organizations. And many of the tribes are under the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which used to be called the Department of War. Changes, yes. And when you look at this, it becomes more and more astounding. And diplomats are finally beginning to realize the gravity and how grave this is in Alaska and Hawaii, because we were removed under 1469.
Now, the sad thing is that the indigenous of North and South America, that includes the Mapuches, that includes the Quechua, that includes, they were never decolonized. We talked about the decolonization of, say, South America, of Colombia and Peru, etc. That was not decolonization. That was just a takeover by the white elitist minority, so that they could remain rich, but the colonized, the indigenous who were suffering a Latin American form of apartheid, they were never decolonized.
Yeah, so
To this day.
So I could put it in sort of a roundabout way, and then we could maybe move on to someone else. I've been speaking or referring this back and forth for 20 minutes. The
When I hear about Hawaii, because
Yeah,
Hawaii is, it's exciting. I also gave you a little gift before departure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll mention that.
Yeah, the thing about Alaska and Hawaii, as we state in the paragraph, is all three of us are charter-based, because there's Security Council resolutions. We are charter-based, and when you're charter-based, one of the points made by Mexico in the removal of Alaska and Hawaii is there's no statute of limitations for non-self-governing territories. We made our diplomatic protests. We said, irrespective of what you may claim for lapse of time or jurisdiction, one of the points that the late Miguel Alfonso Martinez made, and this is another important point with reference to what you guys said earlier, that even though some of these conventions say that it's not retroactive, many of these conventions are based on existing law.
Very important point. This is the dispute, say, with the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. Is it constitutive of international law? No. It is a compilation of existing international law.
Yeah.
It's just for use to organize it in a coherent way, so that you have, say, the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties, and it's Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, and it's logical. You can then identify the beast.
Yeah.
Whereas otherwise you would just have to invoke general principles of law. So it's good to have the convention as a declaration or a declarative compilation of what's already international law.
So what we're looking at for Alaska and Hawaii, and this also can be for Kashmir, is the Geneva Conventions and some of what we can already claim under the decolonization resolutions, and of course,
yes.
1514 and 1541 say that the peoples, in the right of peoples, we have the right of territorial integrity over the states
Yeah, of course.
that are administering us. So, and that was upheld by the Chagos case. So that's very
No,
important for us.
Very few people know the Chagos decision. It's really important that everybody reads it and uses it, because it is superlative. It is something that has very concrete consequences as a precedent to be applied in many other cases.
Yeah, the point I'm leading up to, because the violations are so grave, they're considered a crime against humanity.
Well, remember, apartheid, the Apartheid Convention defines apartheid as a crime against humanity. And that means that this kind of treatment, apartheid treatment, be it in Palestine, be it in Western Sahara, be it in Kashmir,
Alaska and
is
Hawaii.
automatically within the jurisdiction of the ICC. Article 7 of the ICC statute is crimes against humanity. So the apartheid treatment will subsume it under Article 7.
Yeah, and we can use existing instruments to move there. So, thank you for clarifying and explaining not only to Alaska, but to those around the United States that we emailed to in Europe who are listening vis-a-vis Facebook. So with that, I'll say thank you, Alfred, thank you, Majid, and we'll continue with more questions and clarification afterwards.
Thank you. Now,
Finally, beautiful Hawaii.
before I go to Hawaii, I think I will travel a little bit to Kashmir. And then Madam Shamim Shaw, please. Who is a permanent representative of the International Muslim Women Union. Please, Madam.
Thank you. I would like to discuss, the first time I'd love to hear the question answer session rather than listen some statements from Kashmir. I would like
No, we are going through an interactive dialogue, so anybody can ask you anything.
because he's leaving.
He's not leaving, don't worry.
No, I'm not reading. I thought I had
He's
something.
here, he's here.
I wrote reports, but I can't find them.
Carry on, Madam.
No,
Shaw.
I must have left
I have
them.
a very small statement regarding this. For you, Al-Fazia, they offered this presentation of
Noza, please.
370. The people of Jammu and Kashmir are not able to go to the Supreme Court. They cannot even go to any court of justice here in India. What is the recommendation from your side to play the...
Everything comes back to Alfred. Alfred,
Yeah,
you are put on a
I would like to
hotspot.
understand.
I have all the
Because
sympathy
everybody
with you.
Everybody knows here what is going on there, the women issues, as you know that I'm always discussing the women issues, that they are in trouble during these 7-8 months. They were not able to go to hospital, they were not able to get the medical treatment, they were not able to look after their children, their education, and everything was said, it was blocked. Therefore, the question is, how can we utilize these mechanisms as we discussed? And Mr. Trumbu, that if we will go to the International Court of Justice, what should we get and what type of preparations we should have? Because we are talking always, we are not ready to go. Because we are jumping in these things, but we are not ready to have all these valuable documents with us, so that we can go to the Court of Justice or even to the Supreme Court of India.
Well,
Can I briefly come? Very briefly. We are not ruling out. You see, there is a particular system. One is really we talk of the political angle of the Kashmir issue, which of course I wouldn't wish to take to ICJ at all, because it's so controversial. And India very...
it's powerful.
No, not powerful only, Alfred. On the Geneva, on the Genocide Convention, they have signed what is called the reservation clause. And that's what's causing the problem, because Pakistan took them to ICJ during the India-Pakistan War of 1971.
Yeah.
And India invoked reservation clause. And as a result of which the proceedings could not progress any further. And finally, it was on the prisoners of war. which India was holding, and India had declared that we are going to hand over the prisoners of war to the newly formed country, Bangladesh. And they will be tried for genocide here. And Pakistan took them to ICJ. And obviously India raised the reservation clause. We have said no, we are not party to this thing, and you can't take us to ICJ. But it didn't progress further, because then there was a sort of an agreement between India and Pakistan took the claim back. The important point is that on political level, to be quite honest, it will be very difficult to go to an international court where there are such two differing countries. It's Israel and Palestine and such a thing. But on the issues of crimes, which is, crimes against humanity is not within the jurisdiction of ICJ, but genocide is within the jurisdiction. You can take them there, and that is what is being explored. And I think we are being helped by Alfred, we are being helped by William. We will look into that. Now it
The
is
sad thing is that there are other possibilities, you would think that there are other possibilities, like all the optional protocol petitions, procedures of the Human Rights Committee, of the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, of the Committee Against Torture, etc., etc. But India, like the United States, is not a state party to any of these optional protocols. So, India has assured itself or ensured itself impunity, because they have not submitted themselves to this system of international accountability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the battle has to be, of course, a political battle, but also a media battle. It's an information war.
Yeah.
You have to know it. And most people don't know the first thing about Kashmir. They just figure, all these people out there, they're always fighting each other. How boring.
And it's India, Pakistan.
Yeah.
And it's India,
And they leave it there. They say, let them kill each other, and it's the kind of outrage that the media cranked up with regard, say, to Kosovo, or with regard to Srebrenica. Whereas you have worse crimes in Kashmir than in Srebrenica. Srebrenica is us. It's Europe.
Yeah.
The former colonies, that's their problem. So there are double standards, and it's very upsetting, but that is the case. There are double standards, and if at least, because there are, I've met certainly more people with good faith in my life than people with bad faith.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous number of people who think like we do, who think logically, coherently, and have also a moral compass. On the other hand, they're not in power. And, the masses of American people are decent. The great masses of American people are decent. They just let the government do whatever they want to do, and they're concerned only with their lives. Their families, their kids, getting their kids through school, etc., etc. So these atrocities that Donald Trump is perpetrating on the world go on. And no one stands up and say, not in my name. Actually, a few people do, but not enough. And in the case of Kashmir, not enough people know the enjeu. Not enough people know either the fact or the implications. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. I have 2-3 questions which I need.
Just only two.
As you just said, that Security Council does not have the almost authority, so they don't act about the right to self-determination. India is reading and arguing that these resolutions were passed under Chapter 6 and had been a resolution.
I've heard that argument. I've heard it also with regard to Israel.
Now I want to say that statements which have been made by Indian political leaders, especially Jawaharlal Nehru, what I read, I don't know, I want to be correct, that under international law such unilateral declarations made by the head of the governments in clear, specific terms and manifesting the will to be bound have the effect of creating legal obligation.
Yes, correct.
The long-standing rule has been recognized by the ICJ in Nuclear Test Case and also by the International Law Commission in its guiding principles
Yeah.
in 2006, as well as the United Nations General Assembly in its resolution 61/43/2006. What I mean to say that if because when Maharaja acceded to India,
Did he?
did
Did he?
no, what India claims. What India claims, he retained the sovereignty with himself. He didn't surrender sovereignty with India. And the same sovereignty was protected under Article 370 because even in Article 370, we didn't, the people who entered into an agreement and they discussed the issue with the government of India that started the Delhi Agreement, they even didn't surrender the sovereignty. When India abrogated this, what did this Article 370 and unilaterally annexed the state? What is the fate of that agreement which has been signed by the Maharaja? Because when an agreement is signed with two sovereigns, if one of the sovereigns unilaterally avoids or it unilaterally just abrogates that, what will be the fate? Does it mean that the state of Jammu and Kashmir has been sent back to its position? What will be the status of that agreement?
That means he's talking of the 1947 situation as of the 15th August, when dominions of India and Pakistan
And
were created.
number two, if the government of India and Pakistan signed the Shimla Agreement, and because in Shimla Agreement it is written that unilaterally none of the parties will make any annexation or
Changes,
amendment.
yes.
What is the status of that agreement? Does it mean that this agreement has been become infructuous? And when the international community is asking, that they should go for the bilateralism and they should take, India and Pakistan should talk and they
Well,
should resolve the issue.
The violation of international law is clear, but what is not clear is what is the remedy, what is the recourse. Even if the International Court of Justice were seized of the matter, you could actually elevate it to the International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion,
Yeah.
like the advisory opinion on Kosovo. And the International Court of Justice will say that what India did violates international law and it is null and void and you have to go back to the original agreement. That would be what, shall we say, classical international law would demand. On the other hand, India would say, no, try to implement it. The International Court of Justice does not have an army. The International Court of Justice cannot impose sanctions itself. Only the Security Council can impose sanctions. And the Security Council in its current composition is not going to do it. So you have a situation of non-law. You have a situation of a violation of quite fundamental principle, besides the violation of the treaty itself, in total impunity, because there's no remedy. And we have to create mechanisms. Here, I would say, I would like to see the General Assembly have greater initiative, and I would also like to see the Secretary General asking the General Assembly to do A, B, and C, and not just waiting for the, I mean, the Secretary General should think, I'm here for 5 years. I should use those 5 years to do something concrete. Unfortunately, most people think, I want to be here for 10 years, so in the first 5 years, they're nice, and they don't take initiatives. They are careful. And then in the second 5 years, they're too tired to do anything. So it's sad, but more or less that's the way it is. So although I do think that Guterres is better than Ban Ki-moon, he's also not doing many things that he could and should do. And I would tend to think that he's looking forward to a second mandate, so he cannot afford annoying the United States as much as Boutros Ghali annoyed the United States, for which reason he was not reappointed, and then they appointed Kofi Annan, which was not all that bad. I mean, we didn't fare badly under Kofi.
Okay, before we go to Hawaii, very brief comments.
Yeah,
Very brief comments.
no, I also have a question. In Jammu and Kashmir, the line of control, there are three parties to the dispute, two states, India and Pakistan, and we people of Jammu and Kashmir, according to the Security Council resolutions, according to whatever agreement is that we are going to decide about the future. Now there is a ceasefire line. India and Pakistan, after Shimla, change it as a line of control. I am not signatory to any agreement. According to the Indian constitution, people living on Pakistani side are also Indian citizens. According to their constitution,
yes.
whole of the state of Jammu and Kashmir belongs to India, according to Indian constitution. Now, if a person from AJK, from the Pakistani side, cross to the other side, within the state, I am labeled as a terrorist, a cross-border infiltration. The Indian army or the Pakistan
It's a long
army,
question.
they may be responsible to stop these people. But on one hand, India says that I am an Indian citizen. On the other hand, India says that
You are a
I am a
terrorist.
terrorist,
Yeah.
and I am crossing from the other side of line of control. I just want to know from you, according to the international law.
Well, look at the treatment of the Israeli-Palestinian issues in the advisory opinion of 9 July 2004, in the case of the building of the wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here you have a situation that in many ways resembles the dispute between Kashmir, India and Pakistan. And the International Court of Justice found a whole series of violations of numerous treaties by Israel, and of course numerous principles of international humanitarian law, etc., which of course would be also the case if this issue of Kashmir is elevated for an advisory opinion. But then, even after the advisory opinion, unless you have the media behind you that publicizes it, unless you have civil society putting pressure on India, unless you have, say, a disinvest movement that would make it hurtful for India to continue in its intransigence, nothing will change. But sine qua non is getting the information out. And as I say, most people in the international community do not know enough about the dispute. I mean, you should have all resolutions of the Security Council not only in your websites, but it should be something that you push on the London Times, and you push on the Guardian, that you push on the Independent, to make sure that the British population, at least, because they have a historical responsibility as a former colonial power, they should be interested in peace in Kashmir. I mean, they did not, shall we say, when they pulled out, I'm glad they did, but once they decided to allow the Indian subcontinent to attain self-determination, they should have done a better job.
Yeah, true. Yes, Mr.
I'm going to be saying, by the way, very
Thank
short.
you, thank you, Mr. Trambu. I will have a comment on his first part of his question, and I would request Mr. Alford for his expert comment on my comment. This is misleading argument on behalf of the government of India that these resolutions have been passed under Chapter 6. Actually, when there is a threat to the peace and tranquility, it can come within the preview of Article 34 of the Joint Charter, Chapter 6. Wherever there is a threat to the peace. Therefore, it was a legitimate action at that time, and Indian argument that it is under Chapter 6 is false and misleading. Chapter 7 deals with the preventive action. It is preventive clause beginning from Article 39 onwards to 43. These are the preventive measures, just like to grant the sanctions, to stop the air traffic, so on and so forth, for implementation of the decision taken under Article 34. Mr. Alfred.
Yes.
Okay?
That's not
No,
you.
no, very simple. I mean, it is simply a misleading argument to invoke Chapter 6. It really makes no
The
difference.
difference, it doesn't make.
It makes no difference. For Israel, that's exactly the same thing. The resolution 242 of November 1967 was taken under Chapter 6 for political reasons. Simply not to escalate the problem, but try to say, we're going to try to solve this in a friendly fashion. But the language of 242 is very clear, is you, Israel, get out of the occupied territories. That is the bottom line of 242. But that has been violated since 1967 in total impunity. But of course, lawyers are always looking for ways to weasel out. I mean, the function of a lawyer, you would think, if you're an idealist, the function of a lawyer should be
It's important.
government lawyers. Government lawyers should be there to advise government how best to implement international law. But government lawyers are employed to find loopholes out of international law, how best to circumvent international law, how best to cheat international law. That is why they're paid for.
Or the jurists are paid for. Yeah, the jurists are paid for.
And Mr. Alfred, lawyers community are under obligation. We assist to come to the right conclusion.
Well, I must tell you, in my entire education at Harvard, I don't think I ever heard the word ethics. I mean, I was taught how to win cases in court. Period. How to use every trick in the book. How to hit below
I think
the
that things
belt.
have changed since.
Yeah, but let me say one thing,
Very quickly.
because the difference between 6 and 7 is whether or not the states are gonna take this seriously enough, so they act. That's a huge difference, because that's why it's not being done.
Well, if you were to have a resolution adopted by the Security Council, it would be binding under Article 25 on all states, whether the resolution was adopted under Chapter 6 or 7. So, having said that, I can stay very briefly because I promised my wife I'd be there.
Well, Madam Shaw, your question generated such a. Well, thank you very much. I think I move on to Hawaii now. Otherwise, there will be injustice.
Just 1 second, can we request?
One minute,
No, it's
second.
not a question, it's a comment. Mr. Amrit Yusuf to arrange a meeting in Islamabad with lawyers and intellectuals. And we can all, there's.
Well, let that be discussed later.
Good, very nice.
Hawaii, please. No, let me introduce you. Why are you so much impatient? Foreign Minister of Hawaii, Leon here. We are very honorable, honored him to be here. So, Foreign Minister, it is your floor, and we will not allow Alfred to move until you finish your presentation.
I'm going to
I'm
say
sorry,
some
sir.
provocative things that you will state.
I can't because I will be beaten up on my wife. I promised her
That
8
is
o'clock.
sexual violence.
I promised her 8 o'clock. Okay, I will cycle in 5 minutes home, but I only have 10 minutes.
That's sexual violence.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank Alfred for his presentation tonight, as well as for all of the help that he's rendered to all of us for many years. And I was counting back, actually I've known Alfred for 11 years now.
Yeah.
And he's always been faithful and true and accurate with his assessments of things. So we've been depending upon him a lot. Now, in the situation of Hawaii, most of you know what happened historically. Hawaii was taken over by the United States in 1893. Previous to that, Hawaii was a sovereign country operating as a sovereign nation among other nations, and actually had a very active foreign ministry. We had 137 consulates and embassies around the world. We just took a count recently, went through the archives and found 137 Hawaii representatives, international representatives. Most of them had to do with trade, of course, with consulates. But nevertheless, we were quite active in the international scene. In 1854, we were the first, or one of the first countries to ever declare total neutrality, and many other cutting-edge types of policies that our Hawaiian monarchs undertook in order to be part of the world players. Our King Kalakaua was the first monarch or state, first head of state to tour the entire world. He went around the world and toured many countries and established relationships with countries all over the world. So, that being said, the United States in 1893 takes over, and then and it's sort of a comedy of errors that happens. They move in through a unilateral action by the foreign minister in Hawaii, the ambassador in Hawaii. He lands troops to support a coup d'etat, and the coup is successful only because the United States had troops in it. Otherwise, it would have been totally ignored, not even rushed, just ignored. They had no power at all. But the United States backed this. Within a year, the United States rescinded their action, or said that they had acted improperly, or not only improperly, but they had actually committed an act of war against a foreign nation. So President Cleveland said that. And then he committed his country to, at that point, to return or to cause, to undo the wrong that America had caused, which meant to return the Queen back to her position as the head of state. Only they didn't do that. And it's been 20 presidents since then that have failed to live up to that obligation that they took at that time. And so it has been a very great disappointment. But over the years, as the United States kind of set their hooks into Hawaii and propagandized our people, we forgot all about what happened until about 40 years ago, when some of us started to dig through things. And particularly in the last 27 years, 100 years after the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, the United States apologized. And they issued an official apology in 1993 for what had happened in 1893. And in doing so, it kind of woke us up, and we said, well, if they say they never acquired Hawaii lawfully, then we must still be here. And we are. The people are here, and therefore our government was never extinguished. And so we started to dig more into what happened, and realized that what we are dealing with right now is our nation is in captivity. It's not even under occupation, because occupation implies certain international laws apply. This is pure piracy, what happened with Hawaii. But the U.S. has gotten away with it because it made it appear and gave the perception that Hawaii had somehow become part of the Union of the United States. And so this is where we are today. We're dealing with this major deception that happened, and the question is, how do we undo the deception? Things are peaceful and our people are peaceful, but we still are trying to work toward freeing ourselves for this exercise of self-determination, not in the sense of what the decolonization process promises, but through the self-determination of saying we are our own country and we need to rule ourselves. So what we have done in the last, you can take a look at this when you want to, but there's been a really strong movement in Hawaii, and again, because it is a peaceful movement, even though we are undergoing quite a bit of suppression, there's still no bloodshed, which is thankful. We're thankful for that. And Albert Desai's analysis is totally correct that the way that the United Nations has now structured or failed to come through with its mandate for decolonization has actually forced countries that deserve to be decolonized. The only way that they can get the United Nations attention is the shedding of blood and violence. Otherwise, the United Nations does not pay attention and does not consider anyone else except the 17 that remain on the list as being qualified for their attention for decolonization. So we're very disappointed in that, and that's part of what we're trying to do is we have teamed up with Alaska and Rapa Nui and West Papua and many others to press the issue of decolonization, to restart it, to reboot it in the United Nations. So thankful for Alfred's recommendation 69N back in 2013. And based on that, we are working on a consortium of people and nations to press this issue and bring it up this year at the General Assembly.
Very good.
Right, and because this is the end of the third decade for the eradication of colonialism. And they have done nothing in the 30 years. I mean, absolutely nothing except to reinstate French Polynesia, meaning they added one more to be decolonized, but they have not decolonized anyone. East Timor gained its independence, but only because the situation was so drastic that the UN and others had to step in and force the issue. So the same thing is going on in West Papua, where 500,000 people have been killed. And as of last year, the Indonesian settlers now outnumber the West Papuan population. So, so you see where that's going. Anyway, so we're going to be pushing for a resolution for the United Nations to simply allow the Decolonization Committee to open its doors to other people who may have issues. Now, what they do with it afterwards is fine. We don't know. But the thing is, there's no place to go right now for countries to peacefully seek decolonization. So that's one of the items we're working on. The other is in connection with Alaska. And Ron has mentioned several times that a resolution was passed in 1959 called Resolution 1469. It was passed by the General Assembly. And that resolution accepted a report by the United States that both Alaska and Hawaii had willingly consented to become part of the United States. And it is that consent that has caused us all of these problems. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But so in 1959, the United States told the United Nations, gave a report, and said that Hawaii and Alaska needs to be removed from the list of non-self-governing territories, according to Article 73C, 73E, and that the United States does not have to report anymore about the conditions, the situations in Hawaii and Alaska, because they have both exercised the right to self-determination and have been decolonized, satisfactory to the United Nations. Now, the problem is the United Nations never checked the report. They simply accepted it at face value, and they didn't see that the report was totally fraudulent. So the United Nations was actually deceived into taking an action that made them complicit in the capture of our countries, in the piracy of our countries. So Hawaii and Alaska are actually victims of not just the United States, but the United Nations.
Right, yeah, right.
And this is what we're trying to bring to their attention. Now, in trying to pursue how are we going to confront this and bring this to light, we find that we are hamstrung by the fact that the United States is very secure in its claim to the Hawaiian Islands. And so we were wondering about this. There are two phrases that came to mind in the United States Periodic Review in 2015. No, actually 2010. They had a Universal Periodic Review, but they made a side event for civil society to ask them questions. So one of our people from Hawaii asked the question, can you please explain how Hawaii and Alaska became assimilated into the United States? And the answer was, well, he kind of bumbled around for a little while and answered for about 10-15 seconds, and then he said, but the political question has been settled. And this is the counselor from the United States. And we wondered about it. What is he talking about? The political question has been settled. And so we've been working on that ever since. About 5 years it dawned upon us what he meant. And 5 years ago, and what he meant was that plebiscite. What they're saying is that consent was given by the people, even though all these wrongs had been caused prior, from 1893 to 1895, and all these things, in which we have a strong political, legal case that these were actually wrongful actions. Still, the United States is confident or sitting pat in their idea that Hawaii gave its consent and Alaska gave its consent, and the United Nations accepted that. And so this is the part where we're faced with. We need to get rid of
Perception of legitimacy.
Yeah, the perception
The
of
perception based on the media, based on the repetition of
Yes,
the fake news.
right, and it was just like, look, I don't want to take these fake actions.
Yeah.
And
Fake news as
continuous-
well. Fake
and-
news
and
as
it-
well.
Right, and it's an ongoing, abuse of our
Yeah,
rights.
as I said, I will have to leave now, but before leaving, wanted to say two things. 11th of May,
Mhm.
UPR, US.
Yes,
I mean, this must come before.
and this is
This
where we
is
need
the
people's,
May.
this is where we need people's help, because we need a state to ask this, the question again, like Pakistan did in 2015.
Yeah, I think it should be South Africa. It should be an African state.
That would be ideal, and I've
I
spoken
could try
about
to
this.
speak with the South African ambassador, or I could try to speak with another ambassador
Right.
that I
Yes,
know
I'll
from
send you.
Nigeria or Kenya.
Mhm.
But I do think it should come from Africa, and then supported by a number of countries
Right.
from Latin America.
Mhm.
Beyond that, your consortium of nations, the Decolonization Alliance,
Mhm.
I think one of the first things you should do is establish a list of all those people.
Yes.
Well, you also have to reach
It's
out.
almost an
to
endless
many.
list.
Yeah, you have to reach out to many.
500 North American
Right,
tribes.
and certainly the Mapuches, and certainly the Quechuas, etc. And bet you don't know the case of the island of Bioko,
Oh, yes.
the former
Yes,
Fernando
yeah. You've
Po.
mentioned that before.
I mean, that is outrageous what Spain did there.
Mhm.
Without a plebiscite, without consulting the population, just simply two entirely separate colonies, the island of Fernando Po, otherwise known as Bioko, and Equatorial Guinea, different ethnicities.
Mhm.
Put them together and then release them into independence as a united state.
Yeah.
So the poor boobies, the booby population of Fernando Po, suddenly they just changed master. Before it was the Spanish colonizer, now it is Equatorial Guinea. So they are claimants to
Of course, the same
self-determination.
thing happened with Indonesia
Uh,
and
The Cameroonians,
Malukus and
certainly the Cameroonians, certainly the
West Papua.
Ogonis and the Igbos of Biafra, the Tamils, etc. There again, they were put artificially together during the imperial colonizing period. So I mean, this is something we can talk about for ages and ages and ages.
Well, but we're talking is finished, what we're doing is taking some
Not,
action. And
not
what we're-
when my wife is waiting for me.
Yeah, but there's one last point, just a second. There's one last point I wanna make, because Ian Brownlee made this impression.
Yeah.
He said you cannot use domestic law, or its policies, or its deficiencies to settle an international law obligation. And one thing that I pointed out in the Shadow Report, and this is what the United States admits to, and I'll read it from it says, the indigenous Hawaiian people never directly relinquish their, sir, could you either leave or else be quiet? Okay, the indigenous Hawaiian people never directly relinquish their claims to their inherent sovereignty as a people or over their national lands to the United States, either through their monarchy or through a plebiscite or referendum. It's an admission by United States of America, and we say in our Shadow Report, as the same, that the peoples of Alaska and Hawaii, or the free political institutions, were the military and American citizens. It's an admission that we did not decide our status.
No, it's an incredibly
But-
important
But
statement
it's also a
that
trap.
should be in the hands of everybody, yes?
Yes, it's also a trap, because what they said was the indigenous peoples. They're referring to that when we were, as I explained earlier, a nation. And so when they limit it to indigenous people, what they're trying to do is put us into the same category as
Right.
tribes of the United
Now,
States.
'cause that is legally a distinction between
Right.
Alaska and Hawaii.
The Hawaiian Kingdom is Kanakamo'oli peoples. The private lands of the kingdom belong to the Hawaiian peoples, the Kanakamo'olis. That's an important point. That's the point that the constitutional monarchy.
Okay.
peoples-
But
Yeah,
they-
so I really have to go.
Thank you.
Can you,
Yeah.
have you done the shadow report?
Oh, yes.
Yes. I'm always available.
Okay, you want to finish?
Okay,
May I go?
Wait.
They have it on the, it's even in the article on that.
okay,
So,
You do find it.
Hey, you could do
Can you please give some, the co-chair is now Mr. Barnes, and he has taken over, and
okay.
Mr.
I'm still not
CEO is
finished
to
yet.
Yeah,
finish
wait,
it. Yeah.
Okay, what we wanna do is
Drive safe,
to
Professor.
allow, of course, His Excellency, the Foreign Minister to respond. And then we will move to finish, and then we will move to, Madam Shais Safi.
all right. Okay, so the question is, how do we undo the block that has been placed in our way? We cannot ask legal questions until we take away the political question. And this is what we filed in every single venue that can be, and that was rebuffed in every one of them. And even if we have a totally strong case in every one
Thanks,
of them.
Alfred.
But we have been unable to get any traction within any kind of court, mainly because the legal question is superseded by the political question being settled. And so, what we're doing right now is we've undertaken a task similar to what we're doing with the decolonization resolution. We're actually creating a resolution right now, and we're asking countries to support this resolution to the General Assembly to review the action that they took in 1959 when they accepted the United States report. So we're just asking them to review their own action. We're not asking them to review the United States. We're not asking them to do anything else. Did the UN General Assembly follow its own procedure? And that's all we're asking. Because in order for them, and we believe, and other countries have recommended that's how we approach it, we believe that if the UN does start a review of what happened, then all of the information will come out, and we will be able to present our case in the review, out of which we expect the United Nations will then find out for itself that it made a mistake, they made an error, and then they would have to, according to their own charter, they would have to correct that error. And by correcting that error, they would remove the United States validation of their claim that Hawaii and Alaska had given them consent. And once that validation is removed, then the United States is vulnerable to the legal questions. The political question is now set aside, and they were vulnerable to legal questions. So we are going around to various states and talking to them about supporting this simple review of the procedure of the United States, of the United Nations in 1959. So that's
Okay.
where we're at.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, oh, you have one question.
Yeah, thank you. Juliana, I have a question. So, was Hawaii a member of the League of Nations?
Actually, no, because the League of Nations
Just a
was
minute,
formed
just a
after.
minute, could you restate your question a little bit louder for the camera?
Okay. Yes, so my question to Leon is, was Hawaii a member of the League of Nations as it should have been?
No, we weren't. We were actually a member of the Universal Postal Union, which is the precursor to the League of Nations.
Yes.
So 1882, the Hawaiian Kingdom joined the Universal Postal Union.
Yes.
And later, when in 1893 was when our country was taken over, and the United States around 1895 then told the Universal Postal Union that they had taken over the position of the Hawaiian Kingdom in the Union. So so we were not in the Universal Postal Union at that time. Now the list of countries that participated in the Universal Postal Union became the original list to which they formulated the League of Nations. And so yes, Hawaii was in there in the group that became later the League of Nations. Now the Universal Postal Union still exists, of course. And then the League of Nations, of course, became the United Nations. So Hawaii was in place in this communion of nations prior to the League of Nations and prior to the United Nations.
And what did the United States do with the Philippines when it colonized them? Did they also take them out of the International Postal Union?
The Philippines were not in the Universal Postal Union prior to that. They were a colony of Spain. Yeah, and so when the United States acquired the Philippines from Spain in 1898, then they simply eventually lived up to their obligation to decolonize, and so the Philippines was decolonized.
Just one comment, because you made the comment about the League of Nations. After Woodrow Wilson, who was instrumental in creating the League of Nations, went back to the United States, if you look at the congressional record of the United States Congress and the deliberations, they would not join the League of Nations because of Alaska, Hawaii, and others, and the mandate system, basically. So they didn't want to have to list some of these. So now we will move directly to one of our bright young Kashmiri representatives or advocates or whatever you want to say. Shaista Safi is a journalist and TV anchor. And she's going to talk on Kashmiri women and violence. And with that too, we congratulate her for her first maiden intervention today at the United Nations Human Rights Council. And I watched it. You did a very good job. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and it was honored to be here and to hear the deliberations from Sir this output. What the thing that was coming to my mind mostly while we were talking and listening to this deliberations, there's always one thing that people say, that after even so many decades and years of occupation, that people don't know about Kashmir. They are not aware about Kashmir. They do know about Kashmir, but the reality is that we haven't put the real story, the real face in front of the people. As this, the pamphlet I saw, it had that we need to talk the stories.
Yes.
The talk stories, we need the face, we need the stories, we need the case studies. This is not that we need to create them. We have huge number of case studies in Kashmir. We have so many faces, we have so many children, we have so many women, men that we can bring towards the people. Like these are the face of, this is the face of Kashmir, this is the face of Indian so-called democracy, this is the real face of India being a secular country. If you want to see the real face of India as a democratic country, see above the borders of Kashmir. So whenever somebody says that people don't know about Kashmir, then it comes to us that we, the activists of Kashmir, we the people who have been working for Kashmir, that what have we done then? Do we need to change our strategy? Do we need to bring new faces? Do we need to bring the new stories?
That's why you are here.
Do we need to bring the story, the real life stories to the people here, to who you guys have been talking about? Do they know that while Faiz Naqshbandi was here, his mother passed away? Do they know this? And are they aware of the fact that he couldn't go to Kashmir to the funeral of his mother? Do they know this story? Do they know that Abdul Majid Rum, who has been working here since the last 30 years, do they know the personal stories behind this man? They just know a barrister, they just know a person who is very hardcore, who talks about Kashmir very passionately and give all the legal terminologies, but do they know the personal grievances and personal stories behind this face? No, they don't, because we shy away, we don't share our stories, we think that, okay, if I start telling my own story, maybe people say that, oh, he's self-promoting. No, you're not self-promoting, you're giving yourself a legitimacy to talk about Kashmir. You're telling them, yes, I am talking about Kashmir because I am suffering. As I am suffering, my brother is suffering, my family is suffering. For example, if I talk about myself, born in occupation, born in conflict, but when I moved to Pakistan, I lived in exile. I left Kashmir, but Kashmir never left us. It was always in our mind, it was always in our stories, it was always in the songs of my mother. Maybe when my mother was suffering from cancer, I realized that this occupation actually is a cancer. It kills us every day, slowly and gradually. It may not kill everyone at the same time, but ultimately it kills us. Today, as we all are talking about coronavirus, people are now, even in Italy, we see that it's a lockdown, whole country is locked down. We Kashmiris know how to live in a lockdown. We have seen the lockdown for not just after 5th of August, we have seen lockdowns. When we left Kashmir in the 90s, there was curfew, the schools were closed, the hospitals were closed, and in 2019, families coming from Kashmir, they tell the same stories, that hospitals are closed, the schools are closed, and the new element was that internet is banned. In the 90s, there was no internet, there were landlines, they were banned. So things are similar, be it in 1990s or in 2019. Yes. But the thing is, we have internet now, we have social media now, we can tell the huge stories, we can share a lot of stories of people. Yes, Kashmiris, they can't share, they don't have internet access, but we who are working for Kashmir, we the activists, can share lots of stories and can make each and every case study a case study, real case study for the UN rapporteurs and for a UN mechanism as well. So for me right now, stories are really important to bring the family tragedies. I'll just request all of you to tell your own stories as well, to narrate your own stories first and then tell what the suffering, what other people are suffering as well. We need to bring stories in front of people, and we don't have to fabricate, we don't have to write any propaganda, we don't have to make false stories. Each and every one of us has a story. Each and every one of us know a person who has suffered torture, who has suffered this disappearances, who has suffered whatever unlawful activities a country can do. We people of Kashmir has suffered that. So inshallah, when I'll be, it was my first but not the last time coming to here, so hopefully, so
You will give it a face.
so case studies are very important. Our real life stories are really important. We need to tell to the people what we have suffered. It's not just the textbook stories, it's not just the textbook documents we are presenting to you. It's a real life, it's people who are speaking their heart out, and it's their real life stories. We have suffered either in occupation or in exile. We all have suffered, and we need to tell these stories to the people of the world.
Thank
you
you.
all.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That was a very good intervention. This is your main intervention today. Of course, when we use the word sock story, it comes from Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suggest that.
Yeah, that's his
That's what we do.
Yeah.
We find out about it.
Yes.
Okay, now we have one more speaker, Advocate Parvez Shah.
Yes, we have to speak.
Hey.
What do you
Yes.
want?
I'll be very much. Thank you very
Go ahead.
much.
We're sure.
Please,
Wait.
please, let's give some respect to the speaker.
Yeah.
He is the last speaker. Thereafter, you have to hear another half an hour conclusion speech.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrister Trumbo. You have organized this event when no voices coming out from Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and you are becoming the voice of people of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you very much. What India has did, India has annexed finally the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And
No international standing for that.
what is international standing? But it has shown it has finally annexed. What is more worrying to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, that is the area which is, we have to look at. That is, it has started now Plan B. Because the first plan was next the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now it is a Plan B, that is the demographic change. That is the migration.
Yes.
If
We've
we
been
say
talking
that,
for it about a year.
you know, you see that they have almost 37 laws have been applied to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and among these laws, the banking law is very important. Because under the banking law, now the people of Indian occupied Kashmir who have borrowed the loans from the banks, they have pledged their properties, and now they will be forced to pay that loan, and we know that what is the economic conditions of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and definitely most of them will not be in a position to repay the loans, and definitely the property they have mortgaged, they will be sold, and the NSC will get, they have now the option to buy, because already state subject law has been abolished. Number one, we have to. Second is that what is in April, the government of India is organizing the global economic summit. For this, they have already acquired 6
IT summit.
global
Investment.
investment. And for this, they have already acquired 600 acres of the land.
1,708 acres.
No, they have 13,665 canals. They have already acquired. Because now,
Bemina.
no, in different districts, in 10 districts of 9 in Valley and 1 in Udhampur. So definitely, although there has been concerns that the delegation who have been brought by India to Indian occupied Kashmir, they have just been that the situation is not so conducive. They are not going to invest in foreign investors, will not invest. Number 2 is this area needs to be addressed.
Yes,
This
absolutely
is-
correct, 100%.
And third one is the separate townships. townships for the Hindus, because they have identified 10 areas.
Settlement
10,
areas.
yes, settlement. 10 districts of the Indian occupied Kashmir, while these Hindus, and under the guard of these Hindus, definitely others will be. And fourthly, when there will be a national registration, when it will be made up, NRC to Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, those who have been living there, definitely they will get their nationalities and they will be in a position. So these are four areas which we must focus on, what are the remedies available. Secondly, we have come for the last 5-6 months, it has been made clear that courts are not, the Indian courts especially, are not given any kind of justice, and though there is no remedy available. But we have the case of Mia Abdul Qayyum, and you might have gone through the judgment. That was a strange judgment. It was that Public Safety Act is not a punitive and it is a preventive. You see what kind of interpretations courts are giving to the cases. And lastly, we have seen that even Kashmiri Pandits are also concerned about the abrogation of Article 375A. And we have seen that, as I was yesterday talking to one of my senior colleagues, Kapil Kaul, he's a Kashmiri Pandit, he also has filed their petition in the Supreme Court of India. But you see how the courts are behaving, that it took long 6 months to Indian Supreme Court to decide whether this will be decided by the 5-member bench or the 7-member bench. So, for the last 6 months, the Indian Supreme Court could not decide which bench should decide. So there are some concerns because lastly what I am going to say that when India abrogated Article 370, it adopted 4-pronged strategy, and we have to look at this also. It was number one, the movers and shakers. All of them have been arrested. There are different reports, some take 13,000, some take 40, but the number is more than 5,000. So, number one, we have to address that, we have to see how to get the pressure that happens, the movers and shakers who are behind the bars, how to get early release. This is number one, because if we continue to keep behind the bars, and there will be definitely will make an impact. Fourthly, we have important thing is that the sustenance of the movement, because the Kashmir movement sustains, definitely will, if not today, tomorrow. If not tomorrow, the situation will not be altogether. And the number 3 is that what India has done when it adopted this 4-pronged strategy, especially the mosques and those imams who are in the mosque, they have been strictly restricted that they cannot talk about the abrogation of Article 370. And the 4th one is that what India is doing to keep the borders hot, to escalate.
Yes.
Keep the escalation. There are 2 reasons for this. One is to put a pressure on the Pakistan, and second one is that the people from Jammu and Kashmir who might think about the people of Indian occupied Kashmir, put them under constant pressure that they should not raise their voices. So these are few concerns which, because you have you're the expert on this, although you are also a victim, but what has been conveyed to us by the leadership of Indian occupied Kashmir, and to say before you, and I hope you keep away. Thank you very much.
Well, very good, very good. Thank you very much.
So I'll just add one thing. Today there was a decision, there was an application in the Kashmir High Court about use of pellet gun.
Yes.
And it was dismissed by 2-member bench and allowed, it means that they allow the security forces to use pellet gun.
Well, they come under AFSPA impunity. That is the problem. Yeah, go on.
Okay, thank you for your intervention. We can talk a little bit more, if you want.
Some questions, if there are.
Yes.
Any member of the panel, except that we have lost one of the pioneer. Excuse me.
Yeah.
We have lost one of the pioneer panelists, But I think there are others here as well.
Yeah,
Please.
and this, the whole gist of this, because we know what we're dealing with. We're dealing with United Nations, we're dealing with member states, and the politicization and the selectivity. We all know, but we've all made some strides in the last 5-10 years. So on the strides that we have made, where do we go from here? How could we deliberate this discussion to move us forward? So go ahead and ask us, or.
I have some suggestion and some
Can I- can I-
I
recommendation.
have a question here also. After you.
Can I, before you move on, please, to advocate Shah's, on his concerns, the answer to that. I think, to be quite honest, very tangible concerns, which need some kind of a response, not my response, but in some kind of a response internationally, and to prevent such situation to happen, as you have articulated. And I think the best course, the best way forward is to engage. There are only two international courts, one is ICJ and another is ICC, either to engage either one of them or to engage both of them, and that may be a beginning to basically start a sort of a legal battle to address a particular question, but it will involve the whole aspect of the Kashmir dispute. And I think all of us should work towards that, to be quite honest. The time between India and Pakistan, to rely on them, that they will do something about it. I think we Kashmiris have to go deeper into that part, and that may force both India and Pakistan to come to some senses and to really deliberate on Kashmir. So I think to taking it further to the international courts is the way forward, to be quite honest, in the long run.
Okay, you wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to convey the message from the Indian occupied journalists, because there is very grave situation. One of the editors, he has informed me there are around 400 to 500 people who are on exit list. They are not allowed to travel, even they have the passport, and mostly they
Nobody is allowed to travel there who is actively involved in any form of liberation movement.
No, mostly they are around more than 200 are journalists.
They have made a list of 450 people.
Yeah, they are prominent personalities like political activists, leaders, business community. They are also from civil society, and majority is from journalists.
Can we have the list, please?
Yes. Okay. So, what is the pressure on the international community to expose this and to develop the pressure on India, and how they can have the right to travel? And there is also another factor. It is about nowadays since August 5th, 2019, the Indian government has censored the Kashmir media. They are not allowed to publish any pro-freedom, pro-people, any human rights violation is taking place. They are not allowed to publish it. And also some events are taking place at international level, like in Geneva. And I am observing closely the Kashmir media. I have seen the events from the pro-Indian groups are being published in the Kashmir media, and it is very strange. They never had before were publishing such events, and they are totally boycotting us. So we need to raise our voice loudly, and I am myself running a KashmirWatch.com. It is qualified in Google News already in 2007. So I am trying to give tough time to counter the Indian media, and you can see in Google News. If you Google Kashmir, Geneva, you will see that there how many news items are floating from Indian media in Kashmir, and why Pakistani media is silent. Why don't we give them the direction how to counter that strategy? So this is one point.
Okay. Could I just respond very quickly to this one, especially this one? Because we did a talk on freedom of expression. And if you look at one of the general comments of the Human Rights Committee, the right to self-determination is directly linked with freedom of expression. And then you link that with freedom of assembly. So if you can submit this to the special rapporteur immediately, and ask that this be brought up in the next report, and of course, the next report of the High Commissioner.
And another thing is psychological torture of the masses. I am giving my own example. I was in touch with my friend circle, my relatives, and when the internet was lifted last week, now nobody is, even my relatives, they are not responding to any question even. They are not replying. They are getting
Very
scared.
intelligent people.
Yeah.
Because it will be they who will be on the receiving end, not you.
So you have to observe how grave is the situation, how people are facing the problems.
Okay.
So how they will come out from
Okay,
this.
we have one before you.
No, I'm not going to question.
No, but go ahead.
Qureshi, Ahmed Qureshi.
No, I'm sorry, you want to ask?
No, please.
Okay, so
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, sure. I have one question. It's a question, and I hope that Professor Alfred should have been here as well. But my question is mainly as a student of international humanitarian law and international politics. And the question is very simple. We have, as a student of you people, and you've been working here for many, many years. So I have seen 4 models of engaging big powers, countries that influence. I've seen the example of Professor Alfred.
Yes.
That's an example of absolute confrontation and clash.
Yes.
That's one example. And we've seen the results of that. Some good, some bad. Some achievements, some not. Then there is the second example of engaging big powers, and that is the example of Ambassador Barnes. And that is a less confrontational than Professor Alfred, but nevertheless it is confrontational.
Yes.
And it has its own achievements and its own negative points. And then there's a third example of engaging major big powers that I've seen, and that is your example, Mr. Trumbo, and you have a long history, and the way you've engaged vis-a-vis India and how you did. And yours is obviously less confrontational than the previous 2 examples. Sometimes it's confrontational, sometimes it's not. It vacillates, depends on the situation. So there's flexibility in that. And then there's a 4th example of engaging with powers that I've seen and I've studied, and that is Foreign Minister Leon's example. And his is an example of no confrontation, and it's an example of soft engagement.
Yes.
And it has its own achievements, that example. And obviously you can find issues with that as well. And so you have these 4 interesting examples. And when I was assessing all these 4, I was trying to decide which one is better. And maybe that is difficult. So I said that is a very difficult question. Let me ask a less difficult question, which is, forget which one is better. Let me ask a different question. Which one of the 4 should I completely discount? Yeah, so which one of the 4...
It's the same question.
Yeah.
It should be...
Rambo, I will answer his question.
Rambo, I'm not finished.
He must assess his strength.
Oh,
and then confront world powers. Okay, thank you very much.
We're gonna let you answer, but keep it short.
No, he has answered.
Say it again. Say it again.
Say it again. Say it again.
I say he must assess his power
Strategy.
and to confront the world powers.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so basically I have these 4 examples, and I just would like to hear, since Professor Alfred is not here, so the 3 other that remain. So I just would like to hear from you 3 very quickly. Just maybe you've done your own assessment, and I'd like to hear from you, Ambassador Barnes and Mr. Trumbo and Foreign Minister Leon. You're less confrontational. How successful do you think you've been with that? And Mr. Trumbo, how successful you've been with your sometimes confrontation and sometimes being soft, and the soft engagement of Foreign Minister?
I will go with John too.
Okay.
Hot, warm or cold?
I'll start. One of the things that I'm known also about is being very assertive when I have to be. And I am very assertive. One ambassador said, "You're a master." He said, "I've watched when the chair picked up the gavel like this, went like this, and you were talking, then he slowly put it back down, then he went like this, then he put it back down, but you took it right to the edge." So there are times when I do like to take it to the edge, but now we're living in an age where social media, high intelligence operations. I've gone online, and in this very room, I've taught some of our people from Alaska. We chose one whole day where we watched everything about intelligence. And after one of them watched it, they looked at me and they said, "How are we going to win?" They know everything, and they have all these ploys, whether it be they'll intervene sexually, they'll try to entice you, they'll do it either through very clever diplomats, through NGOs. There's a whole list of ways to do this. But because of this, I've seen all this. One of the things that I've done recently, I must say within the last year, is to be more careful and to do very quiet diplomacy. And I mean very quiet, where you meet with some of the diplomats and you see if you can build consensus on something.
So you've walked back on some of your confrontational early.
Yeah, because well, it's like Leon or some others noticed in the past I have been confrontational, but then there are others who say at the time and because of it, it was effective, but then you have to assess the situation. So then I would say for now, I think if we're going to move forward in a way where we can really get some consensus, yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. Yes.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you for noticing that we do things a little bit differently in Hawaii. And that is, it's not that we're not confrontational, it's that we have a lot of respect for the other person too. And always remember that they have a story as well. And the position that they're taking is often understandable. I had a really great meeting with one of our senators from Hawaii. He was the first Hawaiian senator, a person of Hawaiian ancestry. And he was in the Senate, the U.S. Senate, for about 40 years. And anyway, so we had a meeting with him back in the late 90s, a group of us, and we asked him, we said, you know Hawaii was taken illegally. You actually helped to write the apology and all that. You know it was taken illegally. You know we have every right to restore our government. And we said, so why don't you do that? And he said, well, because I don't believe we can ever get the United States to let us go. So I'm going to do the next best thing I can do. So I totally understood that. And I respected him for saying that clearly and I respect for his position because he actually doesn't believe we can become independent. The only difference between him and me is I believe we can. And so when I look at other people in our organism or in our nation, and some of them are very radical. You know, they're ready to pick up arms. And then there are others that are everywhere in between. But all along the way, we respect each other and say, okay, well, that's your position, and I understand it, and that's where you're being called.
And nobody calls each other a traitor.
No.
to the cause.
Well, some do, but you know, that's not.
unique to Kashmir.
Yeah, so anyway, so what
I
what
Ramuzan.
diplomacy works.
Works better. Diplomacy works better.
Yeah.
And that's the conclusion that Ambassador Barnes also.
Yeah, let's
Okay, now let's let Travis,
Yeah.
Let us hear from the chair.
His vacillation between the confrontation and the soft approach.
No, to be quite honest, and I will try to be brief, and I will try to finish by 9:30. So please bear with me. No, there is nothing such as confrontational approach from us per se, to be quite honest. If the other side takes it as confrontational.
But you used to be in the early.
No, let me come to our ethos is it, and that will remain throughout. Self-determination, self-determination, self-determination. Whatever it takes. And that's what we will fight for. And whether other side takes it or anybody else takes it, something much more than that. But that's for them to see. But within the power corridors, within the diplomacy, within the advocacy, that is what will remain, and it will always remain until the people of Kashmir get settled.
But you didn't answer the question.
Well, that's what I said. It is not confrontational.
Okay.
It is, to be quite honest,